What's up, guys, in the BC from Reviews and More. Today is Halloween, and I am dressed as a 2000s emo guy. I chime in with a haven't you people ever heard of? Yeah, sure, we'll roll with that. So today is Halloween, and this is the time of year when Linus indoctrinates Sally into the cult of the Great Pumpkin. Michael Myers endlessly stalks Laurie Strode, and what we're talking about today, Freddy says the famous line, "Welcome to the prime time, bitch." Yes, today we are talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street, but not just A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Nightmares on Elm Streets. Actually, there's only one Elm Street in the series. But today I'm ranking the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I was going to do a Halloween ranking, but I have not seen the Rob Zombie remakes, and I didn't have time to watch them before today, so I'm like, what do I do? So how about Nightmare on Elm Street? Just as iconic, just as awesome sometimes. The only one I'm not counting because I haven't seen it, and two, I haven't seen it, is Freddy vs. Jason. I have not seen it, so I'm not counting it on this list. But today we are ranking the Nightmare on Elm Street film franchise. This is an iconic horror franchise by Wes Craven, who is also known for Scream. But this was his first and arguably more popular series, and it spawned the whole Freddy Krueger character, and Robert Englund has become synonymous with that character, even though Jackie Earle Haley played him in the remake. Johnny Depp got his start in the first one. There's a few actors who got their starts in the old Nightmare on Elm Street movies from the 80s, and all of them have one thing in common, and that is cool visuals. No matter what place they are on my list, just know that all of them are cool looking, aside from maybe the remake because it's just a lot of CGI. But like at least the ones made in the 80s and 90s had a lot of cool practical effects, and no matter how bad the story is, at least you can latch on to some of the cool kills and the practical effects that happen, no matter how lame the characters are, boring the story is. And that's one thing that every fan can agree on, no matter how bad the movie itself is. So just know that that's one praise that I'll give pretty much all of them. Let's get to the ranking. So number 8 is the A Nightmare on Elm Street remake, reboot, something like that. Jackie Earle Haley plays Freddy Krueger in this one, and I hated it. There is some talent behind it. There's Rooney Mara in the lead, and Jackie Earle Haley was great as Rorschach in Watchmen, but nothing about this movie works, in my opinion. It is just gross and not fun to watch. There are just so many moments that I understand that horror is supposed to make you feel unsettled, but I don't know. It's a different thing because they make Freddy in this one out to be a child molester. In the original, yes, he killed children, but this just takes it just a little bit too far. Like, it just goes a little too far into his backstory. I always liked Freddy as this symbol of fear. I don't want... It's like if the T-Rex in Jurassic Park or the shark in Jaws all of a sudden had a family and a backstory. Well, we all know how Jaws the Revenge turned out, because it's literally tracking the Brody family, and it made no freaking sense. But it's like that. It's like these monsters... I mean, there are some monsters that should have backstories and be sympathetic, like Frankenstein's monster. Like, that's a good monster to feel bad about. But Freddy Krueger, I don't want to delve into his backstory that much. I know some of the earlier movies did it, like Part 6, where it was his daughter. But that, I don't know, something about that is just different than how they did it in the remake. In the remake, it's just gross, and I don't like it. It's just not fun. It's soulless. It's lifeless. Nothing really happens, and even when there are some like thrilling or scary moments, it's mostly just reused from the original. There's a shot of the Freddy coming through the wall, but in this one they use it with CGI, and it just doesn't look as cool, because in the original it was like a something. I don't know how they did it, but it was cool. And this one, it just looks fake because it just didn't work for me. I'm sorry. And I don't know why I'm saying I'm sorry, because most people hate it too. But anyway, moving on. So at 7th place, we have Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Part 4 is a huge slap in the face to anyone who enjoyed Part 3. They kill off some of the best characters from Part 3, and they recast some of them, and none of it works. It's just, I understand why they would want to continue the plot from Dream Warriors, but I feel like they actually had a pretty good sequel written to Dream Warriors following the surviving characters from that, but I guess the actors had some kind of scheduling conflict, or they just didn't want to be in it. Maybe they were moving on to bigger and better things, and those silly old slashers. I don't know if this is actually true. This is just what maybe I speculate about. So you kill off the people we already cared about in the last one in the first 15 minutes, and now you're introducing a whole new group to us, and we only have like an hour and 5 minutes left in the movie, because these are short movies. So it just didn't work. It was kind of a slap in the face to anyone who was connected to any of those characters. The new characters are just bland, and basically their entire character traits are just their fears. So like, one girl's afraid of bugs, and that's basically her entire character trait. I love the bug kill. That was really cool. It's one of the lamest entries in the franchise. It's boring. I don't care about anything that's happening aside from here and there's a couple cool kills or a couple cool special effects, but it just didn't work for me. I did not enjoy it at all. This was probably the most boring one out of all of them. I didn't connect to anything that was going on. I was just waiting for it to be over. So that leads to number 6, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. This one is only very slightly better just because they still stay with the Alice story, and so at least we know her from the last one, and she actually has some development with her father, and so that at least is something to latch onto from the previous one, so you're not entirely left with a whole cast of new characters, even though since a lot of her friends were killed off in the last one, now we have a new group of friends, which still, I don't care about any of them. She has a boyfriend. I don't know if he was in Dream Master or not. He probably was. I'm just not remembering very well because they're so boring. I just watched this like a week ago, and I still don't remember a lot because these were just, they came and they went. They just were not very interesting. It's about the same as Dream Master. It's just a little bit, tiny bit better. Not really much better, but, you know, I had to put it somewhere on this list, and I hate Dream Master the most because it directly followed Dream Warriors, which was great, and just slapped me in the face. Dream Master, it's bad, but like, I didn't feel like it offended me like Dream Master did, so it's slightly above Dream Master for me. So in the number 5 spot is Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Now this one gets a lot of flack. Like, people do not like this one very much at all. They said it was a very weak ending at the time, even though there's 2 more movies that try to revive the franchise after it, 3 if you include Freddy vs. Jason. But this was like the end of the main original series. If you're looking at it, I mean, at the time, I'd understand why people hate it, but I think as it's gone on, since we did have a few other movies with Freddy in it that were better, as time has gone on and people have kind of forgot that this was it was supposed to be the end of the franchise, but it really wasn't. And so if you look at it as just another entry and not the end, I actually think it's kind of fun. It's still lower on my list. It's not great, but I do like John Doe. We never figure out his real name, so I'm just calling him John Doe, and that's what they call him in the movie too. He was kind of interesting, and I really like Freddy's daughter having to figure out that she is his daughter, because she has no idea, but then she has like these flashbacks, and she's the little girl that John Doe keeps seeing, and he thinks he's Freddy's son, but it's actually the woman working at the mental institute for corrected children. I don't remember exactly everything. Like I said, I watched these a week ago, and I don't remember a lot because they're not great. But this one at least was a little, like, the characters were a little more well written, and they had ties to Freddy that I thought were somewhat interesting, and there was a little bit of mystery that I thought was kind of cool. And yeah, it gets really cheesy in the last part, but like it's still cheesy in a fun way. Like, we're just having fun. We're watching Freddy spout some one-liners and watching these characters try to find ways to kill him, and he's killing them in really inventive ways because of the dream powers and stuff. So it's not great, but it's one that I don't feel hatred towards. I actually find some enjoyment in this one. There's some interesting plots, subplots, and I think there's a few funny parts here and there. Even if they were like more unintentionally funny, they were at least able to make me laugh. So that's good. Far off from what the original tried to do, which was actually terrify you. So in that regards, yes, this is a terrible sequel, but I mean, we had already gotten so far past what the original was trying to do that honestly, if you're gonna make a movie stupid, go all in. Don't hold back, which is what 4 and 5 did. They kind of were like timid to really go for the zany side of what the franchise was becoming. And part 6 was like, screw it. We're just going to make a dumb movie. And if people like it, they like it. If people hate it, they hate it. And I kind of admire that. This is also the first one directed by Rachel Talalay, which was, she was a line director, I'm pretty sure a producer, probably a co-writer on a few of the past entries. So she'd been there, I believe, from the first one. If not the first one, then at least the second one. Like, she was part of the franchise for a while. And so this is the first one that she directed herself. And, like, I think she actually kind of, like, did a decent job. I think there's some really cool scenes, some really nice visual scenes, and I think that she cared enough about the characters to make them somewhat interesting, and she knew that, you know what, the franchise is already so far gone at this point that why don't we just make it the dumbest thing possible? And I kind of admire her for that. I actually kind of like this movie in a strange way. It's not good, but I admire what it is. Number 4 on this list is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. It's a little slower moving, especially after part 6. This isn't really part 7. It's more of a spin-off type thing. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a meta commentary on how franchise fatigue can happen very easily and how overexposed a franchise can be. And for that, I actually really think it's kind of clever and smart. I do think Wes Craven had a few more years to really figure out how to do the whole fourth wall breaking meta commentary stuff better, because Scream I thought was a lot better than New Nightmare. But New Nightmare really isn't bad. I think for kind of an experimental project in Wes Craven's mind, I actually think it's really cool. But as a movie, it's a little slow paced. Not a lot happens, and the Freddy part was not the best Freddy we've had, because it really wasn't Freddy anyway. It's not the best Freddy movie, but it's pretty interesting for what he was trying to do, and I think it got across the screen fairly well. I think the acting's pretty good, and there are some really cool parts. It's not one that I would rewatch over and over and over like my top 3 picks, but it's still, like, good. Number 3 is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This one is actually really interesting. A lot of people don't really like this one. At least at the time they didn't. I think now people have started to see this as more of a cult classic. And I agree. I actually really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a pretty interesting slasher from the time. There were a lot of cool moments. I think this is when Freddy started to say a few one-liners, and it wasn't quite the same as he was in the first, but compared to like 4, 5, 6, he is a lot more serious in part 2 than he is in 4, 5, and 6. He's still a little goofier than part 1, but like he hasn't gone completely off the rails quite yet. So it's still a little more serious, a little scarier. There's some really cool imagery that I thought was actually pretty creepy, and this is one of the only ones that ever like kind of scared me. I mean, part 1 was probably the most serious one, but I was never like super scared by it. But part 2 has a few scenes of just imagery that just kind of make me feel a little weird. When they go to like Freddy's lair and there's like these dogs that have human faces, like it's just stuff like that that kind of creeps me out a little bit. Some of the imagery is just a little creepy, which is cool. I'm all up for creepy imagery in Nightmare on Elm Street. I like how the guy is getting possessed. A lot of people have talked about the subtext of this film. It's very homoerotic, and I think it adds an extra little layer of depth that some of the other movies in the franchise just don't have. The writers say they didn't intend for that extra depth to even be in the movie. It just kind of happened. The actor who played Jesse actually did come out as gay. But I think it makes it all the better. Like, I think it makes it one of the more interesting slasher movies of that era. And as a sequel, I enjoyed it. I put it in my number 3 spot. It's not excellent, but it's pretty good. It's pretty enjoyable, and there's that little extra layer of subtext, and I had a fun time with it. So, number 2 is, and I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate for this in the comments, but it is A Nightmare on Elm Street. The original 1984, I think. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with 84. I know movies. I know all about movies. Pretty sure it's 84. It's a great horror movie. It's a fantastic slasher. It's a classic. But it's not the one I would watch over the number 1 pick, which you already know what it is, but I'm going to keep talking about the original for a little bit. It's good. It's very good. The thing that I was not a big fan of, and this is kind of a common thing with a lot of slashers, especially in that time, but the acting is just bad. Heather Langenkamp is fine as Nancy. She's probably the best part. And her dad, John Saxon, is pretty good too, but the acting is just, it's a little too cringy. I actually think the actors in some of the later entries were actually better than some of the actors in the original movie. Probably because they got bigger budgets, most likely. I don't know exactly why the acting is better in the sequels than it is in the original. There's really cool, inventive kills. This is really the only movie, aside from maybe the remake, where they actually try to make Freddy like a threatening presence. The last act kind of turns into Home Alone, and it's funny, but like I don't know if it quite fits with the first hour of the movie, which is actually pretty serious, but then it kind of turns into wacky Home Alone hijinks because Nancy booby traps her house in order to capture Freddy and bring him into the real world and stuff and try to get him, and it's just a little silly to me, and it kind of I don't know if it ruins, but it's just a little odd. And the ending, of course, the sequel baiting ending is not my favorite, but I understand they wanted to set up for a sequel, so we had the dummy getting dragged through the window and it looks kind of fake, but yeah, this is a pretty classic movie. I enjoy it. I watch it every Halloween. It's definitely not bad at all, but there are some issues I have with it that don't make it the number 1 spot for me. And that number 1 spot is Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Now, Dream Warriors is awesome. Okay, this movie is freaking awesome. I love the characters. It's like Freddy Krueger meets The Breakfast Club. I love all the characters. Yeah, sure, they don't have the most development, but like at least they're more than just archetypes or stereotypes. They actually have a little bit of depth to them. In the dreams, the kids have powers. They're maybe not as powerful as Freddy, but they can kind of do stuff that they weren't able to do in the real world. And so I love how the powers relate to their characters early in the movie, like how the kid in the wheelchair, Will, who's a big D&D nerd, he's able to walk, and he's like this wizard guy. It's a little silly, but like it makes sense for the character. And I like how each of the characters relate to their dream selves when they have powers, and it's just really exciting, I think. There's a lot of amazing visual effects. One of the best parts is when, I forgot his name, but the kid who sleepwalks, Freddy walks him around like a marionette. So we cut between the dream state where you see his tendons literally like out of his wrist, and you see his tendons like being like held up by Freddy, and it's so creepy. But then we cut back to the real world, and it just looks like he's sleepwalking. You don't see the tendons popping out. But, like, there's some really creepy imagery, but also some more funny scenes, and, like, there's some really great one-liners. Welcome to prime time, which we played earlier, but I'll play it again because it's, like, the best line in the entire series.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
This is another one where it's like, if you're gonna have Freddy say one-liners, why not make them the best one-liners they could possibly be, right? I love the claymation puppet Freddy. I thought that was really cool. It was only for a few seconds, so it wasn't like a really long shot, but at least like it was still a really cool effect. And then he turns into regular Freddy. So Dream Warriors has some of the best kills of the franchise, some of the most interesting characters. I liked all of the characters, even if they weren't the most developed, they were all still very good, and they had really good actors to play them. This movie's just awesome. There's so many cool parts, and it's just one of the most entertaining slasher movies from the 80s, I believe. It's one that I could watch really any day and never get bored of. Whereas the first one, it's a classic, but at the same time, the last act is kind of goofy, and there's some kind of slow-moving parts, and some of the acting is pretty bad. But part 3, all the acting is good. The last act is pretty awesome, how they kill Freddy in this one. And it's just overall really, really entertaining. So yeah, this is my favorite one. This is the one that if anyone were to ask me, hey, you want to watch a Nightmare on Elm Street movie? And you get to pick which one we watch, I'll always say Dream Warriors, because it's just the best. Also, Dawkins Into the Fire, and also Dawkins' Dream Warriors theme song. I love them. Oh my gosh, they're just so cool. So yeah, Dream Warriors is my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street film. And a lot of people go back and forth between if the original is better or Dream Warriors is better, and I say Dream Warriors is the best one. And that's why I hate Dream Master so much, because it directly followed my favorite movie of the franchise and ruined it. So if anybody's wondering why I hate Dream Master so much, that's why. Okay, so that will be it. This is a pretty long video, but I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I tried a little more editing in this one than I normally do, so hopefully you guys appreciate that. And happy Halloween! Tell me what you're dressing up as. No, I wear this beanie because I haven't gotten a haircut in weeks, as you can tell. So I'll put the beanie back on. So cool. I will see you guys later. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Goodbye.
Prince of Elves, demon be gone!